So today I'm doing a little bit of an experiment. If you're listening on the audio podcast, then you are missing it because I am testing recording my podcast live on YouTube. So if you're joining me live on YouTube, thank you for being here. I will try to look at the chat if I can even find it on my screen, but most likely I won't look at it too much today just simply because I don't want to get lost and forget what I'm doing. But I wanted to give this a try just because I usually record the podcast in one take anyway. So I figured it's worth a try just to kind of see how it goes. Today's topic is a branch off of the topics we've been covering in this series over the last several weeks. Today's topic is going to be water contaminants. We've been talking about everyday endocrine disruptors, what you wash with, what you rub on your skin, what you breathe, what you store your food in, all of these different things that we're using in our day-to-day lives that have kind of mounted an attack on our endocrine systems, which is our hormones, how our hormones work. So today's focus is moving into water. And I know that water feels neutral and it feels safe and it doesn't feel like it's something that you should have to worry about. But sadly, it can be because modern water systems, while they were built primarily to prevent infectious disease, and they've done a good job of that by and large, they also have added a few problems because they were not originally designed to remove every trace of chemical that's now present in our environment coming from lots of different places, which we're going to talk about in this episode. Water can be microbiologically safe, meaning there's no microbes that are going to make you sick in a sickness like what you would think of as like throwing up and that kind of stuff, but they can still contain compounds we're thinking about from a hormone and metabolic health perspective. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's go. Okay, hopefully the intro worked, and hopefully if you haven't already, you have subscribed to the channel because if this goes well, I will be doing this more often. And so if you subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications, then you'll get a little your system, your phone, your iPad, whatever, will notify you when I go live so you can watch this in the future. I can't always promise when I'll be recording because I do it all different times of the week depending on when I have the time. I try not to record on Sundays usually, but this week, the way my schedule is, it's just what worked out. So if you are subscribed and you have the little bell clicked to give you notifications, then you will know when I go live and you won't miss it. And you'll get to hear it the absolute very earliest that you can. Now, before we jump into today's topic, I want to pause for a minute and talk about something that a listener shared with me recently. She said that she loves the podcast. She listens every week and she's trying to take care of her health, which I know so many of you are. But this series on endocrine disruptors has started to make her feel overwhelmed. She said it feels like every week she's hearing about another thing in her life that might be harming her body, and it feels impossible to change everything at once. And I completely understand that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. First, if that was you, I want to thank you so much for being honest with me and for taking the time to share your thoughts. And second, I want to say something really clearly. This series is not meant to make you feel like you have to change everything immediately. It's meant to help you see the landscape, to see what's really going on, to appreciate that there's work to be done. But you can't do it all at once, and you have to choose a place to start. Most of us grew up believing that if we just ate reasonably well and we exercised a little bit, that our bodies would work fine. And what many women have discovered as of late is that there are layers of environmental stress that have been put on our bodies that no one ever taught us about. But here's the important part. You can't do it all at once. And I'm not asking you to do it all at once. And me sharing this with you week after week after week in a series format is not meant to make you think that you have to fix it all at once. In fact, I don't recommend that anyone tries to change everything all at the same time. Real health change usually happens the same way anything meaningful in life changes, and that's one small decision at a time. You might start with one thing, maybe switching how you store your leftovers, maybe removing fragrance from your laundry, maybe filtering your water, as we're going to talk about today. And then you just live with that one change for a while. Health is not built through perfection. It's built through direction. It's built through intention. So if you've been listening to the series and feeling like it's just too much, I want you to hear this. You are not behind. You are not failing, and you don't have to do everything I mention in any given episode. Okay. Anytime you do a series like what I'm doing, you risk covering too much too fast. And I knew that when I started, that it was going to seem like a lot. But the benefit of doing it the way that I have done it is that it has it all in one place. So you're not having to search, all through months and months of podcasts. You can go and look and see the titles and see them all together and know, oh, this is where I go to get the information when I'm ready for the next step. Okay. It's easy to locate when you're ready for wherever you want to go next. Even understanding why these things matter is already a step forward, even if you're not ready to implement them. Knowing why they matter is huge. Even if you can't change anything in your home today, knowing these things matter will help guide a decision here or there. Maybe when you're out and about, you make a little bit of a different decision on something that you're going to pick up for the day just because of what you heard. Remember too, many of these things have been very, very much overlapping concepts. So even though there's been several episodes and there's been lists and lists in each episode, many of those things like PFAS, which you're going to hear more about even today, overlap. So it's not every episode being all new information. It's a lot of overlap. So, like fragrances, for instance, are in lots of the episodes. It's not always a long list of new things. It's just showing you how often these offenders show up in lots of places. But once you know how to be aware of them all in one place, excuse me, once you learn how to be aware of them in one place, then you'll recognize them in other places too. And over time, these small steps will add up. So today's episode is not about adding another burden to your life. That is not what I'm here for. It's about helping you understand one more piece of the puzzle and then to decide calmly, thoughtfully how you want to apply it to your life and when you want to apply it to your life. That's all up to you. Now, with that being said, today I'm going to cover water and we're going to talk about water filters towards the end and how you can fairly easily solve the problems that we're going to have in this one. And I've got a free water filter buying guide that will be up on my blog either tomorrow or Tuesday, which is where I'm putting my show notes now. And I'll be sending out an email to my list as well once I've got it done. So if you're not on there, why not? That's an easy way to remember, so you don't have to remember to come back later. You can get on my email list by just shooting me a quick email. I'll get you added. My email is Lori, Lori, at morriswellnessservices.com. So if you want to get on my email list so that you'll get an email telling you when that is there, please shoot me a quick email and I will do that for you. I hope that you all are hearing me well. If anyone is watching live, which again, I have really not any way to see that right now. If you're watching live and you can hear me and everything, if you want to just shoot me a quick message in the chat, that'll let me know. It'll encourage me to keep going, but I'm going to keep going anyway. My little monitors are bouncing around, so it makes me think that you're hearing me and you're seeing me. So let's get started. So we've kind of covered in the introduction that modern water systems were put in place to prevent bacterial spread, and that's great. That is true. They have done a lot of good work in that. Clean water is essential for health. But that being said, contaminants have entered our drinking water systems, and so we need to talk about how they got there, what's there, and then how you can get them out. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. Wastewater recycling in modern systems now is dealing with things like human medications and metabolites that have entered wastewater through human excretion. What's human excretion? Well, that's when you go to the bathroom. Okay, so if you're taking things, or even if you're not taking things, other people are, and those things break down in our bodies and let things out called metabolites. That's little breakdown pieces of the medications. Those are getting into wastewater, which then has to be removed. But wastewater treatment has really only been designed to remove pathogens, which are the things that make you actively, violently ill. They may not remove those trace pharmaceuticals, as I've mentioned. So that is one place that we're getting these contaminants that we didn't used to have. We also get it from agricultural runoff, and that is pesticides and herbicides and fertilizer compounds that are moving into the waterways once they're sprayed on yards or farming, crops, fields, all these kind of things through soil runoff as it rains and it gets pulled down into our water and makes its way into our water system. These different things, different chemicals are getting into our water that way. Also, industrial contamination. PFASs come contaminate groundwater or the contamination, excuse me, from PFASs contaminate groundwater. And that has become a major regulatory issue because they're trying to figure out how to deal with it. And there's no really good way because they're everywhere. As we've talked about in these other episodes, these PFAs are everywhere and they're getting into our body lots of different ways. So this is something that was not there when these wastewater systems were first put in place, and they're not designed to get it out. Also, environmental breakdown products, things like plastic breakdown, they contribute to microplastics getting into our waterways. So, overall, just realize that modern water systems reflect modern chemistry. What we use eventually shows up in the environment. So, all these chemicals that we're using in our lives right now, they provide some conveniences, but there's also a downside, and they tend to add up and they're not well removed from the water. So, how do pharmaceuticals get in our drinking water? I mentioned one way already, the human excretion, but also flush medications. Sometimes people will flush their medications down the toilet, putting a full dose of whatever the medicine is straight into the water. And that is one big way that these pharmaceuticals are getting into our drinking water, also from wastewater discharge. Now, understand these are trace amounts, okay? It's not like you're getting a full medication dose directly into your body at any given time. The real concern, though, is the lifelong low dose exposure over time and the mixture of the different medications and the effects they have on our bodies, especially women who we want our hormones to work a certain way for our fertility. But these medications can impact that because they're designed to impact fertility. And so when other people take them and then they wash through their body and they end up in your drinking water because the wastewater uh, systems are not removing it, then now you're getting downstream effects from the constant low level exposures. So realize that hormones operate on very low concentrations, low doses, low signaling of these hormones. So that's why these chronic low level exposures can become a part of the conversation through things like wastewater. The next thing to consider is PFAs, as I've mentioned. PFAs are a large family of chemicals that are used for grease and water resistance. You find them in all kinds of things like soaps, body products, all kinds of stuff. The exposure in our water comes from, again, industrial contamination, things like firefighting foams, because there's a lot of them in that, and consumer products that have them in there that then get washed into the water system. They matter because they are persistent in our bodies, they don't go away. They're associated with thyroid function changes and metabolic health. Recent EPA rules show that PFAs have moved from a fringe concern to a mainstream regulatory focus. They are a big deal. And so being aware that they're in our water systems and that we need to be able to get them out as much as possible so we put as little of them as possible in our bodies is important. All right. Next thing is chlorine and chloramines. These are things that are used to disinfect and prevent waterborne illness. So, in that function, they are a good thing. But the nuance comes here. Chlorination has definitely saved lives because it kills pathogens in the water. But chlorine and chloramine also create disinfection byproducts, meaning things that come out of them that weren't there before, but after they're used, they have little pieces of them left. And then those things live on, and we get exposed to them through our drinking water and through shower steam and inhalation, as we talked about in some of the other episodes about how the heat and the water being heated, being steamed, increases our absorption because of what the warmth does to our bodies. The goal is not to eliminate disinfection at all. Obviously, we need that. The goal is to reduce unnecessary exposure where possible. So, this is where filtration comes in. We'll talk about this more in a minute. But basically, when you use a filter that removes chlorine, the water's already been cleaned. The chlorine went in, cleaned the water. Now you use a filter that takes the chlorine and the chlorine byproducts out. So you're just getting the clean water without the chlorine in it. It's a whole concept of filtration right there. All right. Next thing to talk about is fluoride. Okay. I know many of you have heard about fluoride and some of the problems that can come with that. Fluoride's purpose is multifaceted, but it was originally added to water systems for supposed dental health. Now, that's debatable. Some people debate whether it is even serving that purpose at all, but we're not going to go into that here. What we're going to talk about today is just the impact it can have on our bodies beyond dental health. The thyroid relies on iodine to make thyroid hormone. Iodine belongs to a family of elements that are called halogens. That same family of halogens also includes things like fluorine, chlorine, and bromine. And because they are biologically similar or chemically similar, they can compete with iodine in certain biological systems. Basically, if iodine is a key, then the fluoride and chlorine, or fluorine and chlorine and bromine, they look just enough like these keys to get in there and get into the lock, but then they just jam it up. They don't ever actually turn it, but they keep iodine from them being able to get in there and do its job. The problem is that iodine is one that your thyroid actually needs to be able to build the hormones that your thyroid builds. So when other halogens are present in higher amounts, they can interfere with that process or take up space where iodine would normally go. And that's one reason some people choose to reduce unnecessary halogen exposure, especially fluoride in drinking water, while making sure their iodine intake is adequate. Okay. Some research has raised thyroid questions or questions about thyroid at higher exposure levels or only in vulnerable populations. Some people say that that's the only time this really matters, but that's again debatable. It's not the same. Now, this is not saying that every fluoridated water system is awful or that it causes thyroid disease. It's just something that you need to be aware of and make decisions for yourself rather than just letting them be made for you. All right. And now the last one in this list is microplastics in water. Microplastics, as we talked about, I believe it was last episode that we talked about plastics. You can go hear more about microplastics in that episode. But they have been identified in bottled and municipal water. So municipal water is the water coming in through your tap. Bottled water is obviously water in bottles. And it's going to be in those bottled waters because those plastics are not inert. They come out into the water, especially when the bottles are heated from being left in the car or coming in on a hot truck or different things like that. Okay. We know that these particles exist in the water. Research into long-term health effects is ongoing, but we do know that there are effects from the plastic exposure. So, as research continues, it would be wise for us to make sure that we are getting as little exposure as we can. At this point, you may be realizing something important. Environmental exposures can add up in ways that most of us were never taught about. We were never taught to think about it. It was not even on our radar. And sometimes women can come to me feeling very frustrated, kind of like the person who left the comment, very frustrated because they've already tried improving their environment and cleaning up their products and maybe even changing their diet, but their body still feels stuck. And that's because reducing exposures is only one side of the equation. The other side is rebuilding hormones and metabolic function. So if you're listening to this series and you're thinking, I want to understand what's really happening in my body, I really want to be able to get this. I want you to know that I offer a free foundation call where we will talk through your symptoms, talk through your goals, and see whether coaching would be a good fit for you. So the link to apply for that is in the show notes, which again, if you're watching this live, aren't quite there yet. So let me go ahead and give you the website so you can go sign up for your free call if you would like to. It's at morriswellnessservices.com/application. You can go do that now today. Okay. Now let's talk about how water contaminants affect the body. So they come in through ingestion. That's the primary route, meaning we drink it, but also through skin absorption, through showering, bathing, steam inhalation, like we talked about in our other episodes when we were talking about different types of exposures of other things. There's also, so after we've ingested them or they come in through our skin or inhaled, there's biological processing that has to take place. So this is where liver metabolism, kidney filtration, fat storage of certain compounds that they can't get rid of. All these things are coming into play and they're all being impacted by these chemicals that are in low dose amounts, but continually there because we're always drinking water, right? So that impacts our hormone interaction pathways, which is things like our thyroid signaling, our metabolic regulation, our reproductive hormone balance, all these types of things that rely on our hormones, but they're being impacted by the constant low dose exposure from these environmental toxins that are getting in through our water. So, with all that being known, now you're looking at me saying, all right, now what? What am I supposed to do about it? Okay, let's talk about what you can do about it because actually, this is one that's fairly easy to deal with, and there's not a whole lot of different moving parts. There's really only one thing, at least, to do in your home, and that is to to talk about getting a filter. Okay, getting a water filter. I heard someone say this not long ago, and it makes so much sense. If you don't have a water filter, you are the water filter. And in other words, your body is now filtering all the things in the water. So this is probably, if I had to prioritize which one of the episodes or which one of the things in the episodes you should prioritize that would have the most impact, this is probably it, because we're drinking water every day, probably quite a bit of it. So are our children. And so this is one quick way to get a lot of things out. Okay. There's different types of filters that we're going to consider. I would say to consider checking your local water report just to see what all is there that you need to be worried about. And just remember just because it says it's a low number of parts per billion and it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, maybe do some research and think that through, like, okay, well, it's only this many parts per billion, yeah, but if I'm drinking that every single day, is this a big deal for my body? As you're looking at filters, there's different types. There's carbon filters, there's reverse osmosis systems, and there are certified PFAS filtration systems. Okay, these are the main types. I will share in the show notes the type of water filter that I use. The brand was called Pro Pure. I believe now, if you look at it, it's Pro One. Again, I will share a link to the system that I have in the show notes. It's changed a little bit since I got it. It looks a little bit different because it's been many years since I got mine. But the reason I chose the one that I use is because it removes all the contaminants that you would expect, but it also removes fluoride without having an extra filter inside of the container. Some systems require you to have an extra filter put in there. So the whole system is a water filtration system. Inside of it are the actual filters, and some of them require you to have an extra thing in there to get the fluoride out. I wanted one that didn't require that. So that's why I chose the one that I chose. And again, I will share it in the show notes. So that is a big one. Filtering your drinking water. If you have the finances, I would encourage you to look at getting a whole house filter or a reverse osmosis system for your house. They're not that astronomically expensive, and it will solve the problem for your whole house, whether it be drinking water or showers or washing your hands or anything like that. So that's one option. Drinking water filter, definite neat option to put as on your priority list. Another thing you can also look at is actually just a shower filter. So it goes in the shower head. It's special shower heads you can buy that will filter the things out so they're not ever getting to your skin. So those are some of the things you can look at as different types of water filters. Some lifestyle shifts to consider: reduce bottled water use. In fact, try to eliminate it if you can. Get you either a stainless steel or a glass water bottle that's reusable and fill it up every time you leave the house. That way you've got water with you and you don't end up having to go buy the bottled water. We talked about how heat puts the plastics into the water, and that's good and that's true. And but the problem is that many of us think, oh, but I don't do that. I don't get my water bottles hot. But you don't know, in fact, they probably were made to be hot in the transport to get them to the store to start with. You don't know if they were sitting out in the sun waiting to be loaded on a truck. You don't know how long they were sitting on a hot truck. Yes, they're cool by the time you get them, but the plastics are already in the water by that point. So if you can get away from using bottled water, that is going to be a really good step in the right direction. And again, shower filters are also an option, especially for those sensitive to chlorine exposure. But even if you're not sensitive, it's just good to get out as much of these or as many of these exposures as you can for the benefit of your overall hormone health. So, the summary of this all, the whole point of this is that water is essential to health. We've got to drink it, we need it, it's essential. But modern water systems reflect modern environmental chemistry, meaning they were not made to deal with all these new things that we have. Okay. You don't need to panic about every glass of water. Just be aware and make thoughtful choices. Reducing exposure is going to lower your endocrine burden, but restoring hormone balance requires metabolic function. So that again is where sometimes you need a little bit more help. So if this series is helping you connect the dots about your health, if you're starting to kind of figure some things out and you're like, yeah, this makes sense, but I want to know more, there are two places that you can go to go deeper. first Verity Village. You've heard me talk about it. It's my private community where we walk through topics like these step by step without any fear or any overwhelm. We talk them through. You're not expected to already know things. We help each other through. We have 3 to 4 live monthly coaching calls throughout the month. We're going to have one live tomorrow, Monday. It's a live question and answer session tomorrow. So if that sounds good and you would love to be able to ask a midwife and health coach some questions, hop in there today. Get in there, join us, and join us for these calls. Second, if you're ready for personalized guidance, you can apply for a free foundation call, as I mentioned earlier, to see whether one-on-one coaching might be a good fit for you. Links to both of those will be in the notes. But again, since I'm doing this live, thank you, first of all, for joining me live, but the notes are not there yet. So you can find Verity Village at morriswellnessservices.com/Verity. That's VERITY Village, altogether, Verity Village. And you can sign up for a free foundation call at morriswellnessservices.com/application. Lost it there for a second. I'm so glad you joined me. If you join me live, thank you so much. I was never able to actually get the chat to show up, so I hope that this all went off well and you were able to hear me. Go ahead and click that notification bell if you haven't already, so that you will be able to get notifications if I do this in the future. And assuming this all shows up well on YouTube, I probably will, because this was pretty easy. I appreciate again so much your time and your trust, and I will see you back here next week.